I wanted to come back to this community afterwards. My family was here, my mom and dad. I'm an only child, so I knew South Florida was a place that I could start a career. Both my parents came from very humble beginnings. They were very poor. My mom grew up in rural Georgia, and I don't mind sharing the story. She was raised by a single mother. My grandmother raised five
Right.
children. My parents were still middle income folks. They took out a second mortgage to pay for my Harvard
Wow.
education. So
Welcome back to the Success in South Florida podcast. I'm your host, Adam Rossen, and on today's episode, we have André Williams. André is a fairly new friend of mine. He's a real estate attorney down in South Florida, has a really cool story. And so, André, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm glad to have you here live and in person. And really, we can talk and our audience can really get to know you and hear about what makes you so unique and successful. So welcome.
thank you so much, Adam. I was really excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've only known each other for a few months, but I'm like, I got to get you on because you have a really cool story. So, the podcast is called Success in South Florida, and we really like featuring people who have connections here, either born here, grew up here, or live here now, and are doing some really cool things. And so I know you grew up here, so I always like to kind of go all the way back and just talk about what it was like for you growing up down here, where you grew up, kind of family influences and all that stuff.
Sure. And I come from very humble beginnings. My mom is a retired public school teacher, and my dad worked for the post office. He's passed, but I would say that was a middle class background. I grew up in Miami Gardens. There wasn't a stadium when I was growing up. I'm a Dolphins fan, but they built the stadium a little bit later. And my parents were religious, conservative. They always invested in my education and sent me to private schools. So I went to a school almost 30 miles away from Miami Gardens, Ransom Everglades, and got a great education there.
So I'm familiar with Ransom. Right? I was a high school basketball coach. I don't know if you knew that about me.
No, I did.
But so I coached in public and private schools in Broward County primarily. But I know Ransom. I played against Ransom. I know Ransom and Gulliver have that big rivalry. And
that's right.
I went to Pinecrest, which we always say is Pinecrest is kind of Pinecrest and Ransom are kind of on the same level for Miami versus Broward and Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
So obviously I know a lot about that. But for your parents to have you go to school 30 miles away, that must have taken some sacrifice.
Yeah, it was a sacrifice for them, but they were making an investment in me, which I really, really appreciate. Now, we met a family from Miami Lakes, so we actually carpooled at some point. So that eased the process a little bit for them. But yeah, they made that sacrifice for me, and they made sacrifices for me all throughout. I graduated from Ransom, went to Harvard undergrad. My parents were still middle income folks. They took out a second mortgage to pay for my Harvard education. So they made a tremendous commitment to me. Did well there, then went to Vanderbilt Law School. But I wanted to come back to this community afterwards. My family was here, my mom and dad. I'm an only child, so I knew South Florida was a place that I could start a career, build myself up. It's not an established community like a Washington, D.C. or New York, so I knew there was a lot of opportunity here for me, having grown up here as well.
Right. And I still want to stick on the sacrifice component, because to me that's so interesting. I hear a lot of stories, and I know my grandfather's story was that he got into Yale Law School and couldn't go because they didn't have the money. And my grandfather has passed as well. He was born in the teens. And so, we're still talking Depression era, and they had no money. So he went to St. John's Law School, still a good school, but there's a big difference between Yale and St. John's. And so for your parents to, not just for you to get in, right, but for your parents to say, yeah, we're going to, our fifth core value at the firm, get to yes and figure it out. Obviously you're a teenager at that point. You know what's going on. So how did that influence you to see the sacrifice from your parents?
So I'm an only child, so I didn't have siblings. So I was around adults most of my life. So imagine that impact on my mindset. So I was a kid, but I wasn't coddled. I was used to being around adults and thinking about problems and solving problems. But I fully understood the sacrifice that my parents were making. Still a young, awkward kid, still trying to find myself. But I always had their support. And we all make mistakes. We all go through that time frame and we're trying to figure ourselves out. But I never felt that I was not supported by them at the end of the day, especially after law school. And you probably went through this process too. You're deciding what you want to do with your life.
Right.
But I always had that support system in place.
Now, on the flip side of that, did you ever feel any undue pressure to say, you know, if I don't get the grades or if I make a mistake in school, right? I party too much, I hang out with the wrong crowd, then I'm not just disappointing me, but look at the sacrifice. Was that something that played a role in your mind?
Absolutely. There was pressure. And I had to strike that balance because both my parents came from very humble beginnings. They were very poor. My mom grew up in rural Georgia, and I don't mind sharing the story. She was raised by a single mother. My grandmother raised 5 children.
Wow.
This was during Depression era. She was born in the teens, like your grandfather, and they were so poor. There were no jobs, and this was Jim Crow South. There were no jobs or meaningful jobs for Black people. But they pick cotton. Now imagine, I'm hearing stories from my mom picking cotton, literally crawling on her hands and knees, picking hundreds of pounds of cotton, and it was seasonal. So they would pick cotton during the cotton season, which would intrude upon the school season, the start of school. So they would always start school a little later than everybody else. My mom still graduated valedictorian of her class. So I had big shoes to fill. And so, yeah, there was pressure because they had incredible hardship, so I really couldn't expect anything less from me, and so I did experience that a little bit.
Right. Wow. Yeah, and it's an amazing story, and I'm glad that you were able to share that today, even deeper than I knew. I just knew about going ransom and Harvard, but that's really powerful stuff. And when we talk about people who are successful, who are leaders, there is that learning, that kind of doctrine of sacrifice a lot of times. Especially when it's something where you're sacrificing for something that is attainable but so difficult to get.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you go to Harvard. Did you know you wanted to be a lawyer then?
So, funny story. So, I love to read and write. I read volumes of books as a young person. And I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but I remember this distinctly. I had a conversation with my dad about being a journalist, and my dad told me very sternly, "Journalists don't make any money, son."
True.
So that was the end of that. But I did have role models. Thurgood Marshall. I always thought he was an incredible social agent. So, I had thoughts of growing up being a Supreme Court justice, although obviously I didn't pursue that. But I knew at that point that I wanted to be an attorney.
Wow, that's amazing. And so it's funny because I'm not a good writer. I love being in court, or loved being in court when I was handling cases. I loved doing that. But when I went to law school, I was like, all right, let me get in a courtroom. And they're like, no, you're not going to see the courtroom for 2 years. It's all writing. It's all research and writing. I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And I've learned over the years that journalists make amazing marketers. Journalists make amazing lawyers because they really know about getting, good writing, concise writing, and being able to put forth really strong arguments in writing. And I just, that's something that I've learned a lot about. Manny, who's the managing partner, he was a journalism major at the University of Florida. And he says that was one of the best things he ever could have done to prepare him for a career in law.
They're great communicators. And, I'm a transactional real estate attorney, but I know in litigation and other types of law, you have to be able to communicate very well and write very clearly to communicate. And what better way to do that than to go to journalism school?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so you decide to go to law school, you go to Vanderbilt. Why did you pick Vanderbilt?
So my parents made that incredible sacrifice for me to go to Harvard. They took out a second mortgage on the house, which they ultimately paid off. But I knew law school was going to be my responsibility. Vanderbilt offered me the best financial package, so that was a no-brainer.
Yeah. And it's the South, and it's a fantastic school.
Yeah,
and it's a great place to be.
And I wanted, even though I loved my time at Harvard, Boston, Cambridge, incredible atmosphere. By the way, Boston has more colleges and universities than anywhere else on the planet.
It's funny. It's the biggest college town in the country.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think in the world. It might be in the world. So, but I knew I didn't want to stay in Boston. I knew, my time there had ended, and I wanted to migrate slowly back south. So Vanderbilt's a good school. Again, they gave me
Very
a
good
financial
school.
package, and so that's where I decided to go.
Okay. And I don't know if you're a football guy, but at least they're in the SEC, so it's good football, good sports too, where you don't really get that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, they have the Harvard, Yale, Ivy League competitiveness. But honestly, growing up in South Florida with Miami Hurricanes football, high-level football here,
Right.
Ivy League football really wasn't my cup of tea.
Right. And so, all right, so you go to Vanderbilt. And what was the culture like there? Did you like law school? Were you very involved, or did you just kind of get through?
So my idea was law school. This is, I just need to plow through these 3 years, because law school is difficult. It's tedious. I was ready to come home after my time in Cambridge and Boston, but I knew it was going to be another 3 years. So, I just, I went. It's the process. I engaged in the process and was happy to come home after those 3 years.
And being a young person there, finding your way, and you went straight through, right?
Yeah,
so
no time off.
Okay, so no time off. Did you have any mentors in your life at that time? And did you know what kind of area of law you wanted to practice?
No, I didn't have any mentors. And my parents, God bless them, they weren't, my mom was a public school teacher. My dad worked at the post office. So they didn't really have any real understanding of the legal process, law school. They wanted their son to go to law school and have an opportunity to be successful. But I didn't have any real mentors at that time. A little bit later in life, I think I had folks who guided me, but not at that time.
Okay. And so why did you come back down here after graduating law school?
So I'm still a mama's boy, and my family's here, and my parents were a little older when they had me, so I knew at some point I needed to be here for them, and so it was an easy decision for me. And again, I wanted to come back here to South Florida, because South Florida is still a great place, I think, to work, live, and play.
Absolutely.
It's still evolving, and I wanted to be part of that.
Right. Okay. And where in South Florida did you end up coming down? And what year was this?
So graduated from law school in '92, came back here to South Florida. And so I grew up in Miami Gardens. My parents had a big house on a nice parcel of land. So I came home, and I'm talking about that family support. It was never an issue about me moving out. I always had that place of comfort to come home to.
They probably wanted you back. It's been 7 years. Right?
Yeah.
I'll come back, spend a little time.
Of course.
Right. So that's great. And where did you end up? Where did you start working? How do you get kind of your foot in, especially in South Florida, when you grew up here? I'm sure you have some connections here, but you didn't stay here for college. You didn't stay here for law school, and you finally came back 7 years later.
Absolutely. And it was, that was also a process, because I wanted to be strategic. I didn't want to put myself in a position, just accept a job or start a job just because it was offered to me. So I took some time. We had Hurricane Andrew, and that devastated South Florida. So SBA was hiring attorneys, because they were offering those low interest loans to families that had been impacted by the storm. So my first job was with SBA as one of those attorneys. Now, honestly, they were paying incredible sums of money. It was really ungodly what they were paying. So I did that for, I think, a good 6 months.
Okay.
Milking that gravy train,
Right.
and then
you got to help people too.
Yeah, right? It was a great experience. And by the way,
Right.
I've connect a relationship with SBA now through a Chamber of Commerce that I'm involved with. So that's come full circle. So there was no rush to enter the private sector. So after that, I got my first private sector job, and my thinking, after being in law firms for some years, was, the idea of a partner was not really enticing to me. It wasn't something I was looking forward to, but I always wanted to position myself so that I could develop my craft and learn as much as I could. And I was very comfortable with moving around in order to achieve that. So if I didn't feel like the place where I was at was providing value for me, I kept it moving.
Okay. Why was that the traditional partner track not something you wanted or were looking
So
for?
I knew I was trained to think outside the box. I mean, that's Harvard helps you create a worldview, helps you find yourself, identify your strengths, your weaknesses as well. And I knew I was an entrepreneur. I didn't quite know what that meant and how that was going to play out. But I knew in those early years of my legal career, I wanted to develop my craft, build my resume, so that when I did maneuver or step away from big firm practice or corporate America, I would have a strong foundation.
That's really interesting. And I'm a little similar, a little different. For me, I was a prosecutor, and at one point, I've always been very autonomous, wanting to do my own thing, be the master of my own destiny. But I had wanted to do that at the prosecutor's office. I wanted to get to homicide, in 10 years, which at the time was unheard of. I wanted to be, one of the biggest, baddest trial lawyers in Broward County as a prosecutor, and really get justice for victims of serious crimes. And pretty quickly, I realized that my path was going to be a little different. There were a lot of things in the office I didn't agree with, and just different things. And being the autonomous person that I am, I said, I'm going to start my own firm. And so I did that very young at 26. I was only a prosecutor for about, a little under 2 years. And but I completely understand what you're saying about really just wanting to get the experience at multiple places and figure out your way, especially from an entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely. And God bless my parents. They were not entrepreneurs. They never worked in the business world, and so there was that you talked about pressure, influence. They never understood the concept of working for yourself. So
right.
Even fast forward, even to till today, here I am, successful real estate attorney. I have real estate investments, and my mom still doesn't understand the concept of working for yourself and not going to a traditional 9-to-5.
Well, being a teacher and working at the post office are two of traditionally some of the most stable professions. So they're probably cautious, stable people. They like coming in, coming out, not making waves, doing their thing.
That's right.
And they're highly intelligent. You can be somebody who's very highly intelligent. And then you can have an entrepreneur who's not as book smart, not as maybe raw intelligence, but has that gumption, that kind of wherewithal, that toughness, or just the ability, maybe less fear in them. And it's two totally different worlds. I won't say one's better than the other, because I'm sure for your parents, their way is the best way for them. But to me, it's always been interesting how people can just have completely different views of the world and views of what they want to do and what makes them happy. And why. So I'm fascinated by it.
Absolutely. And my parents have pensions.
Yes.
Nor I will have a pension. And I think, that probably, made them a little uncomfortable at the end of the day, not knowing that I had a pension to fall back on. But, that's why we do what we do, and that's why we hustle. So, I think that my mom understands a little bit better now. My dad, it took a little bit longer, and he was a Marine too, so he was very disciplined, very traditional.
Right.
And so, but that was still a great background for me, and I have that as well.
So do you think you just learned this at Harvard, or was this kind of maybe inside of you waiting to come out with the right inspiration and guidance?
I think Harvard certainly groomed it, but I think I had some idea about this based on even my forefathers, like my mother's grandfather. The story is he couldn't read or write, and he was a farmer, but he bought land. He owned like 40, 50 acres of land in the little hometown where my mom grew up. And he was not formally educated, but real estate, which I started investing in at some point, was his instrument of success. So I think I knew this growing up, and I knew that was something I was probably going to pursue at some point.
Very interesting. Right. So can't read or write, but yet he's a bit of an entrepreneur, investor.
Absolutely. And he didn't, nobody taught him, but he understood real estate gives you independence.
Right.
And so I think I learned from that as well.
There you go. So that was it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely kind of the spark, and then
Yeah,
everything else just guided and continued to bring it out.
absolutely.
That's amazing. And so you're in a few different firms, learning as you can, moving around, trying to continue to gain experience, knowledge, and wisdom. And what did it take for you to just say, open the shingle, right? Hang the shingle and say, all right, I'm making this leap
Right.
from being working for somebody else to just going all in on myself, betting on myself.
Well, so my last law firm stop was Holland Knight, and I was strategic, and I knew that Holland Knight, obviously an international law, one of the leading international law firms in the world. I knew that was going to be my last stop, because where do you go from there?
Right.
And I was
to another big international firm,
Yeah.
or on your own. That's it, right?
Well, I knew my next step was going to be on my own,
Right.
and I knew that was going to be a great resume builder. So, even today in my biography, I talk about my own real estate law practice, but I talk about how I was an attorney at Holland and Knight, and that adds value to me. That adds tremendous value to me. And so I knew that was going to be my last stop. I wanted to be there a year or two, just so it was credible. But I knew after that I wanted to do something different. And after I left Holland Knight, I had a brief stint at a company, because I wanted that transition into my own real estate law practice. But by that time, I started investing in real estate, and that really propelled me into a real estate law practice. And so that's how it began.
Nice. And were you scared, nervous? Did you have any really, hesitation about that, or did you just kind of just jump all in?
Oh, no. I was nervous, fearful. Again, and my parents hadn't trained me for this. We never talked about this
Right.
at the over dinner at the kitchen table. Harvard didn't prepare me for this. Law school didn't. So it was something that I had to do, and succeed or fail. But I did know that I would have the support of my family at the end of the day. So I was not afraid to fail. And that, as you know, that's the ultimate risk-taking proposition, to start your own business, your own law firm, to start from scratch.
Right, absolutely. And I always say, what I learned maybe about 6-7 years ago is, the acronym I use is for fear is false events appearing real.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I have a situation where I'm worried, stressed, or fearful, I always make sure to tell myself that, look, these are false events appearing real, because I feel like we as people generally go to the worst case scenario, which we know never happens. And I've actually learned so much from failures, and now I'm not afraid to fail, because we've made strategic decisions that haven't worked, and we learn a ton from them. And to some other people, it's like, well, Adam's always trying this, moving this, doing that. And yeah, because I'm going to keep doing it until I figure it out, right? And I'm unafraid to try and then have it not be a success. So I think a lot more people in this world need to manage fear. And I won't say get over it, I won't say eliminate it, but just manage it and push forward, with calculated, smart decisions. And what's the worst that can happen? It's never what you think it is.
I agree. And some call it arrogance, but it is the ultimate sense of confidence, and betting on yourself, and betting on your ability to get it done. And you and I obviously have that trait. Some people can't do it. But I've failed a few times in my life, learned from every experience. And now failure is not something I worry about.
Right. And anybody who says that's arrogance, I think that's misplaced, because I think arrogance is more when you think you're better than somebody, versus just having that internal confidence and trust in yourself and your abilities.
That's right.
But a lot of people project onto others their own insecurities.
They're haters, so they'll get over it.
Right. And so what advice would you have for people listening to this about fear and how to kind of manage it and push forward despite it?
So you and I are certainly products of success, and that independent mindset of believing in yourself, knowing you can do it, not fearing failure. I always look at me and where I came from, my humble beginnings, and the sacrifices my parents, my grandmother made for me. I think we're extraordinary people, and you have to be extraordinary to do the things that we do, to be successful, to lead, to be a leader of men and women, to lead your own business. And so I've always told myself, if I'm extraordinary, I need to be in an environment where that I'm going to be valued and appreciated. Because if I'm not, I'm not going to be able to achieve success in my ultimate goal. So I want to surround myself with people like you who are also extraordinary, because we can do extraordinary things together.
Right. And I'll tell you, at the Rossen Law Firm, at my firm, we want a team of alphas. We have 7 lawyers. They're all alphas. Our legal assistants, really everybody, top to bottom, are alphas. And sometimes it could be, a little tense and a little pressure, because that's what happens sometimes, especially in high stakes criminal law, when we're dealing with people's lives, freedoms, their families, and their futures. But I wouldn't have it any other way, because give me a bunch of alphas all day and let us deal with it and work through together. To me, that's fun. And that's part of seeing, that's part of a team coming together. And that's what I had with my basketball teams. I was very fortunate to coach extremely high level athletes, won a state championship.
Okay.
And I've learned so much about life and business through coaching high school basketball at an elite level. So I've been very fortunate to learn from some of the best and from my experiences. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick little break. We have a commercial break, and we're going to come back, and I want to talk more about the firm. Where is it at today? What are your plans? We talk a little bit about provisors and just, what does the future have in store for you?
Okay.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Right. We'll be right back.
The Success in South Florida podcast is brought to you by the team at Rossen Law Firm. If you need DUI or criminal defense representation, call the Rossen Law Firm at 754-206-6200 or check the description of today's episode for more contact information. The Rossen Law Firm, helping good people when bad things happen so they can achieve their best futures.
All right, so we are back on the Success in South Florida podcast with André Williams. Now, André, I want to pivot a little bit and just really talk about, where's your firm today? What kind of cases and matters are you working on? And just from a business standpoint, what do you do? What do you focus on? Marketing, management, all those great things that I love talking about to all of our guests.
Well, I like talking about it too. So I have a full service real estate law practice and a title company. Obviously, I represent clients in residential and commercial transactions all over the state of Florida. I have a range of clients. I represent clients, very wealthy clients. I've represented billionaires in the past, but I love representing middle income folks, first time home buyers. I have a great relationship with my Miami Gardens community. So obviously those are folks more working class. I'm more of a problem solver around real estate. And even if it doesn't necessarily involve the sale of residential or commercial real estate, if there's a problem, short of that, then I'll get involved and provide value to my clients.
Right. And do you do the litigation part as well, or just straight only transactions?
I don't litigate, but I have colleagues, I have folks who I can refer those matters to. But I'll still be an important part of the process and probably supervise the process for the client at the end of the day.
And do you work with investors or entrepreneurs as well through real estate?
Absolutely. I work the entire range of clients, investors, lenders. So it's a full service practice.
Okay, fantastic. And how long have you had the firm?
So been a real estate attorney over 20 years. I'm a real estate investor too. So it's a real value proposition for a client. I represent them. I'm the legal practitioner, but because I'm a real estate investor, I understand the business side of the transaction or the matter, so I can provide the client a much more consultative representation, so he or she can understand the bigger picture in the transaction.
And I think that provides so much more value. I always tell our clients, I say, look, we're strategists first. Some of us have been intimately in the criminal justice system ourselves, right? I'm a former prosecutor. We have a lot of former public defenders on our team, but we don't come in just kind of one size fits all, or we're the aggressive lawyers or we're the compassionate lawyers. We're strategic. When the case calls to be aggressive, we're aggressive. When the case calls to just, work on relationships and go a little slower, we do that. And I think that really is what benefits the client ultimately. It's not about us, it's about providing value, service, and building relationships with our clients. So the fact that you have that broad-based scope of knowledge and you know their pain points, you know some of the struggles and the thoughts behind what they're doing or what they're trying to accomplish, and not just having cookie cutter process, right? Figuring out solutions to problems. That's so important. And that's what makes, I think, what separates good attorneys from great attorneys. Really being able to think outside the box, and our fifth core value, get to yes, figure it out.
Absolutely. And most folks probably know real estate here in South Florida. Florida in general is very different than any other part of the country. We have New Yorkers, folks from other parts of the country who are purchasing real estate here. We have the Latin American influence. They're purchasing real estate. And then we have our homegrown buyers. So all those influences on real estate means we're going to have skyrocketing real estate prices for a while. And so even today, we still have folks buying houses cash here at a rate of about 41%.
Wow.
Cash
41%.
buyers, 41%.
And we're in 2024 now.
Yeah, and the national average, I think, hovers around 30% more or less.
Okay.
So we're outperforming, the rest of the country. But think about a middle income person who's trying to buy real estate. They're competing with, these well-moneyed folks. And so I provide that value, as you said, because we're dealing with all sorts of folks who are involved in the real estate market here, and I need to be able to engage them wherever they are.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And so you grew up, born and raised in Miami Gardens.
Yes.
You're back now. You've been here. You had your 7-year hiatus, and you're very involved in the community. So talk to us just about your desire to be involved in the community and some of the work that you do.
So I was a city councilman in Miami Gardens, and that was a labor of love. I did that 2006.
Definitely love, right?
Yeah.
Not paid.
Yeah, definitely
love.
I enjoyed representing the people in the community. Didn't enjoy the politics as much, but I was in office in 2008 when the real estate market crashed.
Okay.
And so that really impacted Miami Gardens, especially because remember we had record foreclosure.
Right.
Miami Gardens had one of the highest foreclosure rates in the country. It was around 30%. You could literally drive down a street and see nearly half of the houses overgrown, boarded up in foreclosure. So I engaged the banks. And remember, the banks were not really part of the process because they were blindsided by the real estate crash.
Yep.
And so engaged the bankers, and we hosted a number of foreclosure clinics. The banks came to Miami Gardens. We had hundreds of Miami Gardens residents lining up to deal with engage with the banks to help with, mitigating their loans or working on their loans. And Time Magazine became aware of the work that we were doing. So they wrote a series of articles about the work that we were doing to help people save their homes in Miami Gardens.
It's amazing. I did not know that.
Yeah. And I still have those links, but so that's why I entered public service, to really help folks. But all good things must come to an end, and the politics really, really discouraged me at the end of the day. So and I found no way of investing in the community through a Chamber of Commerce, the Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce, which I founded a few years ago and relaunched more recently.
Oh, wow. So you're always striving to take leadership roles.
Yeah. And I want to take leadership. I want to serve the community, create value for me, create value for you and my friends and other stakeholders. And I think there's a way of doing that. And I think in the Black community especially, business development has to be a driving force, even behind government, but I think building that community.
Right. And you're right. And having business development, small business from entrepreneurial minded people from within too, not just other people coming, into the community to see, oh, well, I can make a buck here, or I can, there's an opportunity, but to have that opportunity from within the community, I think is very important and very powerful.
Absolutely. And we've seen many examples of Black communities or non-mainstream communities being targeted by big companies, carpetbaggers coming in, exploiting their resources, taking but not giving. So that's why this chamber is so important in Miami Gardens, so that we can support local businesses, but we also have a global reach because we want to invite other businesses into the chamber, and we provide a real one-stop quality service to help businesses grow at the end of the day, which is very unique from other chambers of commerce.
Oh, it's interesting. And so you started it and then relaunched it. And how has it grown over the last few years?
So, well, it's grown exponentially, and I've always believed in leveraging relationships and collaboration, as I'm sure you do in your law firm. And so you and I both members of Provisors, which is a high-level networking organization that's nationwide. We're both members of a chapter that I lead. We have great relationships with the Northeast. We are the gateway to the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia. But I'm leveraging the chamber and relationships I have with Provisors to grow all of our businesses. I just hosted a webinar last week, Miami Gardens Chamber of Commerce, Provisors chapter Fort Lauderdale 3, which we're both a member of, and the focus was women-owned businesses. It was a webinar on business development and marketing for women-owned businesses, and we had speakers from Provisors, female speakers from Provisors from across the country spoke. We had 60 people in our room.
Wow.
60 people, 60 women. There were 2 guys, 60 women.
Well, you don't want to discriminate, so
right.
you let the 2 guys in.
Right. We let them in. But it was well done. I had great feedback, and we're going to host more seminars like that in the future. And maybe your firm can be part of one.
Oh, we would love to. We love getting out in the community and just helping in many ways as well, and taking leadership roles. Right.
Yes.
So that's something that seems to be a very common theme with you. You are our chapter leader, our group leader, and you're building the chapter in your mold and with your ideas and doing something different, being the gateway to the Northeast. So, to me, that's very important. I think that's a very powerful message for anybody watching or listening to this. It's about being successful. Leadership and success, they're not the same, but they're intertwined tremendously. And for you to, Andre, to be able to constantly take on leadership roles, whether it's city council, whether it's chamber, or even Provisors, is really a testament to you and your success. And I want everybody to know that you don't need permission from anybody to become a leader or to take a leadership role, right? Did you sit around and wait for somebody to anoint you king of the castle, or did you just volunteer and make it happen yourself?
No, I took the reins myself, and I saw a need, and I knew I had the wherewithal to create the value or, to solve the problem. And that's what I did. That's leadership, folks.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of one of the many reasons why you're successful. So, Andre, we've gotten so many great nuggets from you, pearls of wisdom with you and your story. What advice would you have for people listening to this, watching this, who maybe, just want a mentor or need a little help to bring out that inner leader or that inner entrepreneur? So what would you say to everybody?
Well, I talked about being extraordinary and surrounding yourself with other extraordinary people like our relationship. And I think everybody has to, if you're serious about leadership or becoming an entrepreneur, you have to take a reckoning of yourself, where you are in your life, your strengths and your weaknesses. Don't focus so much on your weaknesses, but focus on your strengths, because those make you extraordinary at the end of the day. And if you want to be an entrepreneur or successful in a relationship, in whatever capacity there is, define what your strengths are, define what makes you extraordinary, and then capitalize on that to make you a better person, to make you a better leader, to make you a better father, to make you a better husband, but always be extraordinary and focus on your strengths.
So that's amazing. And I really want to talk about this a little deeper, because I want everybody to listen to this. I always grew up in sports, and the way I was coached was focus on your weaknesses, get better at your weaknesses, get better in your weaknesses. And it wasn't until I started coaching basketball at a very high level when those coaches taught me and said, no, Adam, when we are high level, we want to focus and double and triple down on our strengths. Mm-hmm. And we want to bring in other people who their strengths are our weaknesses. So one of the basketball teams that I coached, were extremely talented, and we had one player, for example, who's a great 3-point shooter. And his role was you catch the ball and you shoot. You don't need to dribble. Just play decent defense, but you don't need to be a great defender. You don't need to be a great passer. Just catch and score. Catch and shoot, catch and shoot. That's your job. And we have other people on the team who are great defenders. We have other people on the team who are great ball handlers and can do all of those other things. And when you're building a team, you want people who can, cohesively, play together, right? And a lot of it is, if you think about it, it's like the Avengers. I love Marvel, love the Avengers, right? Sometimes, as great as Captain America is, sometimes you need the Hulk to come in and just smash things, right? And if you had a team of 7 Captain Americas, well, that would be really good, but that would not be an elite team. You need different people with different strengths, different weaknesses, different experiences to come together and collaborate. So the fact that you said that really speaks a lot to me, and things that I've learned over maybe the last 10, 15 years of my life that I wasn't really taught as a young person, as a young athlete. So I want, everybody really can take some wisdom from that, Andre. There's a reason we're aligned.
Right.
Definitely. Now, people listening to this, watching this, if they want to reach out to you, maybe if they want to, connect, maybe they want to, knock on your door and say, hey, I want you to mentor me, or I want to be involved, or I want to follow you around or learn from you, or just call you out of the blue. I'll give you an example. I was on a call on Wednesday with a young lawyer, just emailed me, said, hey, Adam, I'm thinking about starting my own law firm. I know I've been following you for a while. Can you talk to me? Let me tell everybody here, people like me, people like Andre will never tell you no. We will always want to pay it forward. So how can people best get in touch with you?
So, Law Office of André Williams, my law office address, 1120 102nd Street, number 5, Bay Harbor Islands, Florida.
And they may be knocking on your door literally. We'll see.
My phone number is 305-626-5955. My email address is andre@awilliamslaw.com. That's andre@awilliamslaw.com. Miami Gardens Chamber, you can follow us on Instagram at Miami Gardens Chamber. The website is miamigardens.chamber.org.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, you're easy to find. You're
Yeah.
always around. So that's great. I know anybody, you always want to have that giving, pay forward, spirit. So Andre, thank you so much for being here. It was great to talk, great to connect. And I know our listeners are going to have just, an amazing experience learning and growing with you.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed this.
Perfect. Bye.